This tutorial is going to look at fitness tests and fitness testing and just some of the questions that you might be asked. Here, what I've got a few statements from the last few exam reports from VCAR, and you'll see that they're all delivering exactly the same message. The first one, students who had participated in practical activities demonstrated an ability to link their practical experiences to their written examination. The next one down in that last sentence, conducting and participating in fitness tests allows students to understand this component of the study. The third statement, students who had participated in practical classes that supported the theoretical content of PE were more likely to be able to demonstrate an understanding of such activities as fitness testing. And the last one, down the bottom as well, many students were unable to define each component and could not provide an example of a fitness test and a training method, indicating they had not participated in fitness testing or training. So every single VCAR report that's come out is saying the same thing, that you need to participate in these activities to gain an understanding and an appreciation of how they work within the body and what exactly they are targeting. So please, if you haven't done some of your fitness tests, or if you haven't been able to for injury, go back and have a go at them. Organise to come into the PE office and have another go at undertaking that, because it's the overriding message that you need to do it to understand it. This is a checklist. It's by no means, it's comprehensive, but by no means definitive. So there are definitely more that you need to know. It's such a big area within the course. So you need to know with the fitness components, obviously the definitions, and then being able to classify them into health or skill related. You need to know at least 2 tests for each fitness component. And what you need to do as well is being able to identify a training method for each fitness component and also an activity for each fitness component as well. Now that needs to be specific to the fitness test that's conducted, and we'll talk through an exam question a little bit later on that actually shows you why you need to know this particular aspect of the course. You need to know the order of a fitness test battery. So if you were to order different tests that are being conducted, you always undertake the most fatiguing fitness test at the end of the battery, and there's been a question on that previously. You need to know the difference between submaximal versus maximal testing. And a really good way of thinking about this is that if you were able to undertake the test again in the same day, or even with a short break, an hour or 2 hours, and get a similar result, it's not a maximal test. So something like a vertical jump, if you had an hour or 2 break and then went back and did a vertical jump, you're likely to get similar results. So it's not maximal. Something like the beep test, on the other hand, you wouldn't be able to perform that on the same day and achieve a similar result. So that is a maximal test. So that's a good point for differentiating between maximal versus submaximal. You need to know how to make a test more reliable and more accurate. And you also need to have a good understanding of how to conduct the most common tests. So something like the phosphate recovery test, the yo-yo test, and the beep test. Good to get around that and have an understanding of how to run it. Let's have a look at some exam questions here. The first one, so this is going down, so we're part C of the question. There's a couple of other questions there, but this one's the one I wanted to talk about. So as part of a battery of fitness tests, and the battery of fitness tests just means a group of fitness tests, Charlotte conducts a series of strength tests and the results are shown. So if you've undertaken these strength tests, straight away you're going to be feeling a little bit more confident that you're going to be able to answer the question, and it's given the result and the rating. The question here asks why Charlotte used 4 different tests. And if you look at them, we're looking at hand grip, leg, bench and abdominals, you'll see that we're testing different muscle groups. So the test is specific to the strength of different muscle groups, and strength is specific to the muscle groups that have been trained as well. So this will allow a more rounded approach, or a whole approach in terms of determining strengths and weaknesses for Charlotte, and that will enable her to design a training program that can be specific to the areas that she needs to work on. If you look here, 51% or 52% of the state got 1 mark, and 19% of the state got 0 marks. And as we said, that strength is specific to the muscle group, so many tests were undertaken for each muscle group, and it allows her to identify weaknesses and target specific muscles. You needed to say that last point, which is probably where a lot of students missed out. They might have said that different tests target different muscle groups, but they didn't go further and talk about the outcome of this, that it allows her to identify specific weaknesses for targeting within the training program. So continuing on with this question, part D now, from the results, the 7-level abdominal strength test reveals a weakness in the fitness component of strength. So if you've undertaken the 7-level abdominal strength test, straight away you're probably going to be feeling more confident with this particular question, because what you need to do is describe 2 different circuit-based exercises that will improve the result of this test. So that's what I was talking about just earlier on in that checklist when I said that you need to have an activity that's specific to the test, because you might know a strength test. It might be, you might be thinking of a leg press that is a really high load and low repetitions, and you might think, well, that targets strength, and yes it does, but you can't write that here in the answer because we're talking about a specific test or specific activity for abdominal strength. So what you needed to do within your answer, and there's 3 lines there, so you need to describe the activities. Something like sit-ups would be fine, crunches would be fine, a plank would be fine, lowering your legs down and up again, and there's an opportunity to draw a diagram there. You didn't need to, but if the space is there, you might as well use it. So don't just think that writing plank is going to give you the mark, because it says describe. It doesn't just say state. So you need to actually describe what it is, and go for it, draw it. Anything to get the marks or guarantee that you get the marks. So here's another one for you. This is it's a really nice one because it links the definitions, the fitness tests and the training methods there, but it was the way students answered this particular question that got them unstuck a little bit. So let's just have a look at the question, and we'll really highlight the importance of reading the question here. Muscular power, strength and endurance, local, are all fitness components that relate to specific capabilities of skeletal muscles. In actual fact, power, strength and endurance are all types of muscular strength. I've seen that come up on an exam quite a few years ago now, but it's worth noting. In the table below, provide a definition, so really highlighting that importance of having a definition of each fitness component, an example of a recognised fitness test, and a specific training method for each component of fitness. Some have been completed. Each training method must be different. So definition, you've got those, you've done them on your cue cards, your glossary of terms, so you've got those down. Example of a recognised fitness test, you need to put one in for each of those, and we'll have a look at the results shortly. And a specific training method. Because it needs to be different, you can't write down weight or resistance training for muscular power or muscular endurance, because that's already been written down. Really note, anything that's written in bold within a question, really attend to, because often that can be a point of difference in terms of getting marks. So in terms of answers, only 12% of the state got 6 marks here. Hopefully you're thinking that you would be getting 6 marks, at least with your definitions. Definitely, that's an easy one. With the example of a recognised fitness test, if I can just draw your attention to muscular power, and if I can just draw your attention to the 3rd dot point down, the seated basketball throw. What you needed to do then is you actually needed to say that it was a seated basketball throw. If you just said basketball throw, you didn't get the marks. So that's being really pedantic about the points, but make sure when you're talking about the tests, you know the recognised tests and you know the full name for it, and then the specific training method. So plyometrics or circuit training, you could put that. And you can't state the same training method for muscular power and muscular endurance. It needs to be different, as noted by that bold there. What I want you to do now is I want you to pause the tutorial, and I want you to have a read of this question and look at the data, and so that you can actually answer the question before we go through it. So have a pause of it, have a read of it, and then continue on with the tutorial. What we're looking at with this particular test is we're looking at a test that has a series of dot points, and what it's related to is it's related to a repeated sprint test. So straight away, if you're thinking repeated sprint test, even without looking at all the information, you should be thinking that it's going to be more an anaerobic type test. So if you go through and read all those dot points, you'll see that there's a sprint zone, and then there's a jog, and then there's a rest for 25 seconds between the sprints, and it's performed 10 times. So you should be thinking, well, this most closely aligns with the phosphate recovery test. And we know the phosphate recovery test is a test for anaerobic capacity. What we also know is that your result decreases as you go through the particular testing. So what we've got here on the far side is we've got the results, and you can see that there's a decrement or a decrease in the speed for each of the sprint. There's 10 sprints and there's 2 performers. So let's have a look at the question. What component of fitness does the repeated sprint test measure? Anaerobic capacity would be the best. Remember, they'll accept anaerobic power as well. As the test progresses, the ability of the athlete to run at the same speed during the fly zones, that's working fastest, diminishes. With reference to the recovery rate of the dominant energy system, explain why this occurs. So you should be thinking, if it's repeated sprints, the reason why we get fatigue will be one of those fatigue mechanisms, and you should be talking about fuel depletion with regards to the ATP-CP system. So that's what you should be thinking about when you're talking about this particular answer. It's worth 4 marks. So you need to state your knowledge and then link to the information here. So you need to say that the dominant energy system is the ATP-CP system, which produces energy at the fastest rate. And what occurs is that it requires a certain amount of time, and you need to put that specifically in. So 3 minutes for 98% of CP to be replenished. What you need to say then is you need to be able to say that with only 25 seconds recovery, that CP is not going to be fully replenished, which means that there's an increase in contribution from the anaerobic glycolysis system, and that produces energy at a slower rate. So it's really important when you're talking about these repeat sprints that you're talking about the increase in contribution from the anaerobic glycolysis system and even the aerobic system, which produces energy at a slower rate. And link further, go to the outcome, therefore decreases intensity. So the answer, anaerobic capacity, and then if we look down here, ATP-CP system lasts for approximately 10 seconds, therefore more than half is used during each sprint interval. Here's where you put your knowledge in. It's really important that you say it takes a certain amount of time, 3 minutes for 98% replenishment of CP stores. You didn't need to say both of those particular stats. Therefore, as the test progresses, each sprint interval will have less CP stores to create energy, and the athlete will have to work at a lower intensity. Now, it would be best for you to put in that there's an increase in contribution from the slower anaerobic glycolysis system. This exam question is probably about 4 or 5 years old now, so I think with the information that they want now, they want you to go even further, and they're expecting a higher quality of answer. So really important that you put that extra step in there.